Is Mr. Moskowitz from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for this hearing. I want to thank the subpoena that you sent. I want to thank Ranking Member Raskin and your work, the letter you sent to the committee. And I also support the creation of a commission to get to the bottom of what happened. Director, I just want to give you an honest assessment of how this is going for you today. Did you happen to catch the hearing many months ago in education where there were a bunch of university presidents and Elise Stefanik asked a very easy question and couldn't get an answer? Did you see that hearing?
No, I don't think I did.
Okay, well, let me tell you, it didn't go well. And the short end of that story was those university professors all resigned. They're gone. That's how this is going for you. This is where this is headed. Okay, this is, I don't know who prepared you for this. I don't know how many times you've testified in front of Congress, but a president was almost assassinated live on television, not just for Americans, but for the world to see. And this being your first opportunity, I understand there's an ongoing investigation. I understand there's things that you can not talk about, but the idea that we're getting less than you did on television is something that Democrats, independents, or Republicans are going to find unacceptable. My high school, Marjory Stoneman Douglas, was on the list of mass shootings that Representative Raskin held up. That very day, the school resource officer, a police officer, did not run into the building. He hid in the stairwell while the shooter was in the building. He stayed outside, never helped. Okay. He also directed other officers who showed up on the scene not to go into the building. When it was determined that the failures in response and training, and that the sheriff fired nobody in his agency, Governor DeSantis then removed that sheriff. I supported the removal. So here's my question. You said there's going to be accountability. I understand you don't want to give us names. When you say that, are you telling the committee that once it's concluded, you're prepared to fire the people on the ground who made poor decisions that day?
I'm prepared to take the actions necessary.
No, that's nonsense. Okay. Accountability. The failure was human. That doesn't mean they're bad people. It means they failed that day, and a former president was almost assassinated. Okay. Are you prepared to fire the human failure on the ground? Yes or no? When you have the names of where those failures were, they're people. It's not like a piece of technology failed. It was people who failed that day. Are you prepared to fire them?
I don't have an answer as to whether.
Well, then how can there be accountability if you're not prepared to fire someone? And the reason why your name is going to be the person who's held accountable, the reason why members in this committee are calling for resignation, and I join in that, or for the president to fire you, is because you're saying there's going to be accountability, but you can't commit that people are going to get fired. Let me ask this question a different way. If Trump had been assassinated that day, if the gunman had succeeded, okay, would you have come and tendered your resignation?
I would still be sitting here because I would want to ensure the integrity of the investigation.
Totally understand. That's a fair answer, that you would have set up that process. But would you have had the honor to come in front of the committee and say, former president was assassinated on my watch, there should be new leadership?
I think that I have admitted that there was.
No, that's what I'm asking. Would you have tendered your resignation if he had been killed?
That occurred on my watch, and I am accountable for that.
Okay, but would you have tendered your resignation if he had been killed?
I think that I've admitted that I've taken accountability and will take responsibility.
Okay. Well, let me ask I want to follow up on Representative Connolly's question, in which he asked about guns, and you were not willing to commit that makes your job harder. This is not about the Second Amendment. If there are over 400 million guns on the streets, if all of those guns were machine guns, would that make your job harder to protect people?
Again, I think weapons that are out there.
If all of those guns were rocket-propelled grenades, would that make your job harder?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Perfect. This is not a trick question. Thank you. Okay. I won't ask the other 15 things I was going to do. I was going to do drone strikes, but it's okay. So that's all we were asking. It creates a challenging environment. It has nothing to do with the Second Amendment or people's rights, but it does make your job harder. So credit to Representative Connolly for asking that question. One last thing, Mr. Chairman, and I'll conclude. You know, there was a question asked, is an Iranian assassin more capable than a 20-year-old? And I have been tough on Iran. I probably have more resolutions on Iran than almost anyone in Congress. But I can tell you it isn't Iranians walking into schools and grocery stores and movie theaters and churches. It is 20-year-olds, right? And some of them are mentally unstable. And they have access to guns. And they're domestic terrorists. Someone talked about Christopher Wray. Christopher Wray has talked about domestic terrorism. And so, yes, we collectively come together on foreign threats. And I am not at all debasing the fact that there are foreign threats here and abroad. But there are domestic threats. And we have to get to the bottom of how we stop domestic terrorism, because it was a 20-year-old who walked into my high school and killed 17 people. He was plenty capable, and he was an Iranian. Thank you.
Chair now recognizes Mr. Timmons from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Cheadle, we've asked you a lot of questions and haven't really got a lot of straight answers. I have intentionally created a line of questioning that I think that you can answer. So the first question is, do you agree that the allocation of Secret Service resources should correspond with the risk profile of any given event? A higher degree of risk at one event should get more resources. Is that fair?
That is fair.
Okay. And when two events occur at the same time in the same geographic vicinity, that the risk profile of each event should be taken into account, and whichever event is greater risk should receive greater resources.
That is correct.
Okay, so I'm going to go over the Trump event. So this was publicly announced July 3rd, Butler, Pennsylvania. The venue is an outdoor fairground, open air, no existing security. The crowd size was expected to be tens of thousands. It ended up being over 20,000. There were general and specific threats from foreign adversaries. As the chairman of intelligence remarked, Iran has said they want revenge, as well as when President Trump was in office, he made a lot of people mad, terrorists to be included all over the world. And, you know, President Trump is the former president and the future president. So I would say that that is a fairly high risk event. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay, let's conversely, the First Lady had an event at a casino in Pittsburgh, just a few dozen miles away. It was a dinner for the Italian Sons and Daughters of America. It was publicly announced on July 10th. What's interesting is that the casino is actually extremely secure. They already have magnetometers existing prior to this event even being announced. It was in a ballroom. And the size of the crowd, a mere 400. There were no specific threats. There may have been general threats. And the asset is the First Lady. Those seem like there's a huge disparity relative to risk. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Multiple whistleblowers and various media outlets have reported that the Pittsburgh field office of the Secret Service allocated 12 additional post standers to the First Lady's event and 3 additional post standers to the Trump rally. Is that correct?
There were no assets that were diverted from the First
So no.
Lady's
This is a very
visits.
simple question. I'm not asking if anyone was diverted. Did the First Lady's event that was relatively secure, especially compared to Trump's rally, get 12 assets? And did the First Lady's event get 12 assets and Trump's get 3 from the Pittsburgh field office? That's a yes or no question. If you don't know, don't answer it. I mean, if you don't know, don't
The number
answer
of
it.
personnel that were allocated to both of those events were comparable to the risk at both of those events.
Wow. Really? So you think that the Pittsburgh casino, 400 person in a ballroom with ingress egress through probably a very well-guarded parking garage was 4 times more dangerous than a 20,000 person rally in an open field with the former president and future president? You think that that's 4 times more dangerous, the casino event?
I didn't say that at all.
Well, they got 4 times the resources from the Pittsburgh field office, who was likely in charge of the final walkthrough for both events. I mean, we've continually highlighted the failures of the Secret Service at the Trump rally. And, you know, you have the former and future president getting shot. You have multiple injuries, 1 fatality. And I would have to think that if we had 9 more post standards, 9 more individuals that have the training and the integration into the Secret Service defense of Trump at that rally, that I have a feeling that Crooks would have had somebody come say hello to him before he fired a bunch of shots. What do you think that's possibly true?
There were significantly more assets and resources available at the former president's event than there were at the first.
Who made
lady's
the
event.
decision to deploy 12 post standers to the casino where the first lady was having a 400-person dinner, and only 3 people from the Pittsburgh field office to the 20,000 person plus Trump rally? Who made that decision?
There were additional Secret Service resources available at the former President Trump's event.
Who made the
day.
decision to deploy 12 to the first lady's event and 3 to the Trump event?
The allocation of resources is decided based on the availability of personnel and their location and where they are, but there were sufficient resources
What did you just
that were
say?
given to.
Did you
the
just say there were
former
sufficient
president's
resources? President Trump
event
got
that
shot.
day.
Someone got killed. There were not sufficient resources, clearly.
There was
And it
a
doesn't,
gap.
it doesn't take 27 years of experience to know that. And whoever made that decision, it probably wasn't you, needs to be fired. And then you need to resign because this is absolutely unacceptable. And you've lost the trust of the American people. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes Ms. Tlaib from Michigan.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Director, for being here. You know, when we hear the headline, a 20-year-old young man with access to an assault weapon commits an act of mass violence. I mean, we've heard this before, over and over again. But the unfortunate thing is that my residents don't get a committee hearing. We have not had one committee hearing about the over 260 mass shootings that we've had, killing hundreds of people, injuring hundreds, changing their lives forever. And don't get me wrong, to many of my colleagues, I mean, I watched, and even the pool of blood, the screams, it was horrific. But it made me think about the images I saw after mass shootings at schools, grocery stores. I mean, I think of Buffalo, New York at a supermarket where a racist gunman killed 10 shoppers with an AR. In El Paso, AK-47 style assault rifle killed 22. In Florida, in Parkland, Florida, 17 students and teachers murdered, again with an AR. In Pittsburgh, at a place of faith, Tree of Life Synagogue, 11 murdered. And don't get me about Newton, Connecticut, which still breaks my heart. 26 murdered, including 20 elementary school children. This year in Michigan, we've had, Mr. Chair, 2 mass shootings. 21 shot in Detroit. One of the most horrific shootings we've seen. 2 killed at a splash pad in Rochester Hills, Michigan. 8 shot there. Again, an assault weapon used. But the difference here is the former president gets a hearing in his attempt to assassinate, but our residents don't get a hearing about mass shootings, about gun violence in our country. You know, Mr. Chair, I ask this wholeheartedly. You know, they don't have Secret Service to protect them. They don't. I don't have these mass agencies protecting our kids in the schools or the supermarket, movie theaters, or going to a block party in Detroit. I don't have that. We don't have that. But I can't believe we're just going to focus on that and not the fact that we're hearing yet again in the headlines, a 20-year-old young man having access to an assault weapon, a weapon of war. Many of my veterans say they have to be trained to use, but he can get it, wasn't safely stored by the parent, grabbing that gun, and innocent lives were lost. Director, I know you got asked about this, and I think it's important, though, you know, for us to hear this. But how difficult is your job when there's such easy access to assault weapons in the streets?
I think the job of a Secret Service agent and officer is incredibly difficult. I think the environment we deal with every day and the dynamics of the threat environment is incredibly difficult. These are brave men and women who put their lives on the line. And a day like we had on July 13th is a day that no one in my agency ever wants to have as their responsibility. It is an incredibly difficult job.
Yeah, I immediately thought of the children in the audience. I mean, when you think about going to a rally with your family, Again, their lives are forever changed. The incident are never isolated. I really believe these incidents are never isolated. And I know Detroit Free Press had reported that the 20-year-old Pennsylvania shooter looked up the 2021 Oxford High School shooting in Michigan. Can you comment on what information this shooter was looking up in regarding the tragedy of Oxford High School, where it took 4 of our high school youth there?
I'm sorry, I'm not able to. The FBI has those details.
So you can't even tell us, I mean, was he looking at the type of weapon? How many,
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have those details.
do you
to
have, I mean,
share.
did they share that with you though?
I don't have the full content of what his searches were. I think that they are still in the process of examining all of his devices.
Okay. Again, again, the impact, I want to be really serious about this. The impact on our families is more than just this political rally, Mr. Chair. We have to talk about this, even if we're in disagreement. Let's talk about it, because I've seen statistics that show that we could be saving lives now if we ban these weapons of war from being able to buy it at the local store down the street. I mean, we just can't continue to allow this to happen. And unfortunately, my residents are not former presidents of the United States. They don't get a hearing. They don't get Secret Service, any of that. And even among those that are expressing the failed in the system, they just deserve better. They truly do. Thank you, and I yield.
Chair now recognizes Mr. Burchett from Tennessee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Cheadle, the shooter was set up on the roof of the AGR International